Breaking tonight, we are getting our first reports that some Americans are being evacuated from parts of Iraq as a frightening new terror group captures a series of Iraqi cities, vowing death to non-Muslims or anyone who stands in their way. This is amateur video said to be showing the militant group parading the captured Iraqi police forces through the streets. President Obama today met with his national security team to discuss the increasingly troubling situation. This group is bad. It's very bad. But one member of the Senate Armed Services Committee says that's the last group of people the president, the national security team I'm talking about now, should be asking for advice.
I say to the President of the United States, get a new national security team in place. You have been ill-served by the national security team and the decisions that you have in place now and the decisions that you made.
Mark Thiessen wrote most of President Bush's speeches on Iraq during his time at the White House. He's now a fellow with the American Enterprise Institute. Mark, do you agree with Senator McCain that the president's being ill-served?
Oh, it's a complete disaster. It's an unfolding disaster. And to put it in perspective, just think about the situation that Barack Obama inherited when he came into office. Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which is this group ISIS that is now on the march in Baghdad, going towards Baghdad, was defeated both militarily and ideologically. Militarily, they had been driven from all of their safe havens. Their leader, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, had been killed. They controlled no territory. They were on the run. Ideologically, the Iraqi people, the Sunni masses, had risen up against them and joined with America to drive them out, instead of joining with al-Qaeda to drive America out. So they were defeated ideologically and militarily. And the situation was so good that the Obama administration was trying to take credit for it. Joe Biden went out and said Iraq is going to be a great achievement of the Obama administration. Instead, they squandered it all. And we now see al-Qaeda on the march. They went from having no safe havens to being on the verge of taking over a nation. That's the situation we're facing right now.
We have that soundbite from the vice president. Let's take a listen.
I am very optimistic about Iraq. I think it's going to be one of the great achievements of this administration. You're going to see 90,000 American troops come marching home by the end of the summer. You're going to see a stable government in Iraq that is actually moving toward a representative government.
And you say today, instead of that success, that they are on the verge of starting the caliphate. That was bin Laden's vision.
Absolutely. They're 100 miles outside of Baghdad. They've taken over Mosul. They've taken over Tikrit. And what's so frustrating about this is, I mean, for one thing, those gains that are being squandered right now were paid for with the price of American blood. Mm-hmm. Americans died to liberate Iraq and drive al-Qaeda out of those cities. But beside the squandered sacrifice, they are going to use those gains to follow us here at home. I mean, they are not going to be satisfied with taking over Syria and Iraq. What they're in the process of doing right now is turning Iraq into what Afghanistan was in the 1990s, a safe haven from which to carry out attacks. And we know this because Ayman Zawahiri, in 2005, we intercepted a letter from Ayman Zawahiri to Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the leader of al-Qaeda in Iraq. And he said that they had 4 stages. First stage, drive the Americans out. Second stage, establish a caliphate in Baghdad. Third stage, use that as a base to attack other countries. Fourth stage, the clash with Israel. They've accomplished stage 1. They are in the process, 100 miles away from Baghdad, of nearly accomplishing stage 2. Stage 3 is to attack us. So this is what we're facing here. This is a very, very serious situation.
And this group is so radical, this ISIS is so radical, even al-Qaeda has disowned it. Al-Qaeda doesn't want it. The people who killed 3,000 Americans on 9/11, they're trying to distance themselves from this group because they're too radical for them. You say it didn't have to be this way, that the president, in your view, made 2 critical mistakes. What were they?
Well, the 2 critical mistakes were, one, withdrawing every single American troop out of Iraq against the advice of his military commanders, which created a vacuum in Afghanistan, which allowed al-Qaeda to regroup and reconstitute itself.
In Iraq?
Second, in Iraq, yes, al-Qaeda in Iraq to reconstitute itself. Second, he did nothing in Syria, did nothing to help the moderate pro-Western rebels who were begging us for support, which created a vacuum in Syria that allowed the reconstituting al-Qaeda in Iraq, now ISIS, to move into Syria, create a safe haven there, draw recruits from around the world, train them, and now plan this march back into Iraq, where they are now taking over cities.
And now, And now what's really crazy is that now that we have decided to help some of the folks in Syria, not to mention the Iraqi forces, these bad guys with ISIS, this bad group, they're now using American Humvees. They've taken some of our weapons and equipment that we've provided, and they're using them now against our allies, and I'm sure they'd love to use them against us as well. Mark, thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
We are learning more about this al-Qaeda offshoot that now reportedly controls nearly a third of Iraq. The commander of this al-Qaeda spinoff now controls the world's wealthiest terrorist group. They just stole $400 million from an Iraqi bank, which they went in and seized. Some are even calling him the new bin Laden. Today, Republican lawmakers warned that man could soon order a terror attack on our soil if the U.S. doesn't make some serious policy changes and fast.
The ISIS have as part of their agenda to attack our homeland. The next 9/11 is in the making.
Brooke Goldstein is a human rights attorney and director of the Lawfare Project. Do you believe that it's that bad? The next 9/11 is in the making?
You know, I have to say the comparison between al-Baghdadi and
that's this bad guy heading up
of ISIS, the head, and Osama bin Laden is quite an apt one for every reason that Mark said. Is that basically ISIS has now been resurrected from the dead because of the void that we left in 2011 in Iraq, and because Syria is now a training ground and a recruitment ground. And if we learned anything from 9/11, we know that all you need is an American passport, access to within our borders to be able to carry out an attack. And we are seeing now, American citizens, European citizens, Canadian citizens are now being recruited to train along ISIS, along other al-Qaeda affiliated groups in Syria. We had the first American suicide bomber in Syria. The attack on the Jewish Museum in Brussels was carried out by a jihadi who was trained in Syria. So they are now coming home, and God forbid we should have another 9/11. But if we don't take ISIS seriously for the threat that it is, a theologically motivated threat that wants to wage war against the West, that is threatening now Jordan. They're threatening to invade Jordan and kill the king there, the Hashemite king.
And you can only imagine what their plans are for Israel.
They've stated what their plans are. We don't have to imagine. They've threatened to invade Gaza and Lebanon. Jordan is now calling for immediate American military assistance to secure its borders. But if we weren't willing to provide assistance to Iraq, where we've thrown $15 billion to train the Iraqi security forces that we've been misled to believe are capable of defending themselves, why would we be willing to help Jordan?
You know, but you look at this group headed by this very mysterious guy. He's not like some of the other al-Qaeda leaders. He doesn't like to be seen on camera. He maintains a disguise. His whereabouts are unknown. He's not a flashy guy. He's about 42 years old, we're told. But you look at their tactics, Brooke, and they're so brutal. I don't want to get into the details, but it's as brutal as you could possibly imagine. You have to feel for the Iraqi police force, which is, I mean, they are not prepared morally for the type of beheadings and being shot down in the street while just walking along that this group is unleashing on them. They've already imposed Sharia law in the cities that they're controlling in Iraq.
And it's a hard pill to swallow that the Iraqi troops basically abandoned their post in Mosul and in Tikrit. And what we're seeing now is that ISIS and al-Baghdadi is even stronger. They've gone from, in 2006, they were just an ember that we left burning, that we failed to extinguish, to now one of the greatest non-governmental, non-state actors, terrorist actors, the greatest military threat to the West. And as you mentioned, they now have an airport. They're holding the Turkish embassy hostage, so they're bringing in a NATO ally to this fight, and Turkey says is going to do something. Again, they're threatening Jordan, and
they're taking a hard look at Baghdad as well, and we are considering evacuating our embassy in Baghdad. I mean, if they control Iraq and parts of Syria soon, and they actually have this Islamic State from which to launch and plan jihad, Brooke, what should we do about it? The president today said there's not going to be any boots on the ground. The American people don't want that. He said he wants to work with international partners, but he's not ruling anything out yet.
I think that it's quite obvious what happens when there's a void with the American military. And we have to take this as a case example. When we withdrew our troops without leaving any type of military presence whatsoever in Iraq, we have ISIS. So I don't think it would be a good idea to have this policy of complete non-engagement any longer.
We will continue to follow this one. Brooke, thank you.
Thanks.